Good afternoon, directors. I'll be taking roll. Director Melanie Bagby, Director Chris Corsi,
Here.
Director Delinda Fisher,
Here.
Director Gerard Giudice,
Here.
Director Sarah Gurney,
Here.
Director Linda Hopkins,
Present.
Director Ariel Kelly,
Here.
Director Mark Landman,
Here.
Director Sandra Lowe,
Here.
Director David Rabbit, Director Rosa Reynosa,
Here.
Chair Chris Rogers.
Here. So first of all, I want to welcome everybody to this year's first meeting of SCTA and RCPA. I want to welcome a couple of our new colleagues that'll be joining us for this year. We have, of course, Supervisor Chris Corsi being welcomed back, one-time member as a city council member. And then good to meet you and see you again, Rosa Reynosa, and thank you so much for representing Windsor here on the board this year. Before we kick off too far, let's go ahead and go to our first item of the day. That's our non-agenda items for public comment. If you have a comment today for items that are not on the regular agenda, but are within the jurisdiction of SCTA and RCPA, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature on your Zoom. We won't be able to get into a back and forth with you, but we can take some notes down and can definitely ask staff to follow up. With that, Drew, do you want to handle public comment for us?
Yeah, certainly. So I see one member of the public, Sam Salmon. I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you permit yourself, unmute yourself, excuse me.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. It's nice to see you all. I see you all probably too often. Anyway, I wanted to raise this issue of a green waste disposal and composting facility. I don't believe that's on your agenda and probably not even set for a future agenda, but I do think it has to do with transportation, greenhouse gas emissions, and also organics. I do pay attention to the zero waste meetings, and I'm not so sure that a compost facility in Sonoma County is at their top of their list. It's certainly on their list, but I think anything you can do, that would be SCTA and as well as RCPA, to see that this gets to be a priority for the county. I might understand that we might be taking compost as far as Sacramento, although I know it goes north, but it could be going east. So I just wanted to point that out. I think we have to address greenhouse gas emissions in every way we can. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak on items not on the agenda.
All right, thank you so much, Drew. And also I missed and need to welcome Sandra Lowe, our newest member from Sonoma. Sandra is new to SCTA, certainly not new to the region, and so I'm sorry I missed you, Sandra. We'll go on to today's consent calendar. Madam Executive Director, do you want to introduce things on the consent calendar or have any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The consent calendar is made up, since we have a few new members, I thought I'd go through the structure of it. We have concurrent items that are for both SCTA and RCPA. They tend to be more administrative in nature. Then we've got a few contract items under SCTA as well as RCPA for ongoing work on our sales tax measure, our work with Caltrans, our work on Vision Zero, and also on energy efficiency projects. So that is what makes up the bulk of the consent calendar today.
All right, thank you so much. Are there any questions on the consent calendar from the board?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Before we put a motion on the table, let's go to public comment.
Thank
See
you.
if there's any comments from the public on our consent items.
Sorry,
Okay,
doorbell
seeing
went off. No, I don't see any members of the public with their hands up. My apologies for that.
Great, thank you so much, Drew. Seeing none, I'll come back to you, Director Kelly, for a motion.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, motion from Director Kelly, second from Director Giudice. Is there any comments on the consent calendar? Great, then Drew, can you please call the roll?
Yeah, Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Gurney,
Aye.
Director Hopkins,
Yes.
Director Kelly,
Yes.
Director Landman,
Yes.
Director Lowe,
Aye.
Director Rabbit, Director Reynosa,
Aye.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye. And that passes. Thank you, everybody. We'll move on to item 4.1. That's the election of officers for 2022. Before we get into the motions, let's go ahead and go to public comment and see if there's anyone who wants to weigh in on item 4.1. All right, I don't see any, Drew. So we'll go ahead and come back. If you'd like to make a motion for item 4.1, that's the election of officers. Suzanne, do we need to take these individually or can we take a motion for both?
For both chair and vice chair?
Yes.
Typically, they've been individual, but
With that,
We'll start
Mr.
with the
Chair,
motion.
I'd like to nominate Chris Rogers for the position of chair for this coming 2 years.
I
I'd
appreciate
like to
that.
second that.
Thank you, Director Landman and Director Bagby. That's a motion and a second. Director Gurney,
Thank you. I'm ready with the next motion after the vote.
okay. Are there any other motions for the chair position? All right, seeing none. Drew, if you'd like to call the vote, and thank you, everybody.
So on the motion from Director Landman, Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Gurney,
Aye.
Director Hopkins,
Yes.
Director Kelly,
Yes.
Director Landman,
Yes.
Director Lowe,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye. All right, that passes. Thank you, everybody. I'm looking forward to it. Now let's make sure we get a vice chair so that way when I mess up, they can jump in and save the day. I'll go to Director Gurney.
Okay, to save your day, I nominate Director Hopkins for vice chair.
And Mr.
Second.
Chair, I'd like to second that.
I heard a second from Director Kelly, beating out Director Bagby. Do we have any other motions for the vice chair position? Okay, Drew, please call the vote.
Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Gurney,
Aye.
Director Hopkins,
Yes.
Director Kelly,
Yes.
Director Landman,
Yes.
Director Lowe,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye. And that passes unanimously. Vice Chair, do you want to say any words?
Just that I am really honored and excited to work with all of you and also excited to keep up the good work on the climate funding ad hoc. And I don't think you're going to be messing up too much, Chair Rogers, Mayor Rogers. So look forward to tag teaming. Thanks.
And then, Madam Executive Director, do we also want to do the executive board at this time?
yes, please. So the composition is made up of the chair and the vice chair, two other members and an alternate. And
So the current executive board is myself. I will add the vice chair to it as well, replacing Susan Gorin, who was the previous chair. And then we have directors Fisher, Kelly, and Bagby have had an opportunity to serve for the last year. Is there anybody who would like to make an additional nomination or make a nomination for the extra seats, the 2 seats and the alternate?
Well,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to see Director Kelly. I believe she's the current alternate. I'd love to see her be a full member. So I'd nominate her for the full membership.
Would
Okay.
second
Would you like to complete your nomination? Give us 3 and let's see if we can get folks there.
I think I volunteered enough people lately. Would anyone like to raise their hands and nominate themselves?
All right, let's do this. I will nominate Directors Fisher and Kelly as the primaries on the executive board and Bagby as the alternate.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Are there any other suggestions or nominations? All right, Drew, go ahead and call the vote. Oh, sorry, Director Fisher? No, you're good?
I was just
All right,
going to
let's call
offer a
the vote.
second. I was going to offer a second to that.
On the motion, Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Gurney,
Aye.
Director Hopkins,
Yes.
Director Kelly,
Yes.
Director Landman,
Yes.
Director Lowe, Director
Aye.
Reynosa. Yep.
Sorry.
Sorry. Director Reynosa,
Aye.
and then Chair Rogers.
Aye. And that passes unanimously. Thank you for your service to the executive board. Looking forward to working on some big items coming up. Suzanne, let's go to 4.2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So 4.2 is the SCTA RCPA annual report, and we have Ross Clendenin here from our public affairs side of the house to share with you the accomplishments from the last calendar year.
Good afternoon, directors. So the 2021 SCTA RCPA annual report is being presented to you today for approval. The annual report provides an overview of SCTA and RCPA activities and accomplishments over the past year. The report features brief descriptions of these activities and links to additional information if it is needed. I'll provide an overview of the report, which you will also find linked in the agenda packet for today's meeting. A physical copy of the report will be sent to the directors following approval. Despite the continuing challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, SCTA and RCPA made progress and met with success in 2021 on both the transportation and climate fronts. The comprehensive transportation plan was completed. Work continued on Highway 37 flood and congestion mitigation, and the Bay Red Water Upgrade SAVE program began service for customers in the city of Sebastopol. Measure M continued to provide funding as we prepare to transition to the Go Sonoma Act in 2025. Public input was received on the Vision Zero action plan, and the Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy was adopted in the interest of improving Sonoma County's climate future. In September of 2021, the Sonoma County Comprehensive Transportation Plan was completed. This milestone is summarized in the annual report and will provide guidelines for equitable and sustainable transportation practices in the coming years. An overview of SCTA's 2021 transportation funding activities is presented in the report. The SCTA funding program was kicked off in 2021, starting the process of making funding selections in 2022 and beyond. The Quick Strike funding program, a one-time MTC program, was fully implemented in 2021. We also helped facilitate annual funding for transit programs and bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure through the TFCA and TDA3. SCTA's programs and projects are featured, including a draft of the Vision Zero action plan and the Measure M annual report, both of which are being presented to the board today. The Vision Zero dashboard compiles local crash data to provide an in-depth look at the causes of fatality and major injury accidents and how to avoid them in the future. In 2021, RCPA adopted the Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy that sets a countywide goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2030. The strategy has been designed to address equity issues, with many climate change hazards disproportionately affecting the county's more vulnerable and disadvantaged community members. Coordination continued with RCPA's partners in 2021, with feedback on the strategy from the Climate Action Advisory Committee and local community members and organizations. RCPA also hosted a Civic Spark Fellow in the Santa Rosa office who was working with the city of Sebastopol to develop a climate action framework. Also in 2021, RCPA completed grant work expanding education and availability for electric vehicles in Sonoma County. Participation continued in the BayREN program, helping to implement codes and standards to advance climate and sustainability goals. The city of Sebastopol became the first utility to enroll in the new Water Upgrade Save program. The city of Cloverdale approved joining the program later in the year, with customer service expected to begin in spring 2022. RCPA received support from local air quality districts to continue working to implement climate protection and greenhouse gas reduction measures. A report developed with the Urban Land Institute on wildfire, energy, and economic resilience in Sonoma County was also released in 2021. The annual report concludes with the 2021 financial reports from SCTA and RCPA. I thank you for your time today. Please let me know if you have any questions. And again, a link to the annual report is included in the board packet, and a physical copy will be sent out pending approval. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Ross. I'll bring it back to the board and see if anybody has any questions on this item. All right, seeing a lot of shaking heads. Let's go to the public then for public comment. If you're interested in providing public comment, hit the raise hand feature on your Zoom.
I don't see any hands raised at this moment, Chair. Oh, wait,
All right.
I see one just popped up. Alrighty, Steve Bertelbaugh, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you. I am just interested in how many copies are available, printed copies are available for the public. It's some of us like to have them because they're easy to refer to. And how do we get one?
All right, thanks, Steve. I'll bring that back and we'll ask Ross when we're done here. Let's see if there are any other hands first before we do that. All right.
I don't see any other
We'll
members
close
of
public comment. Bring it back. Go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, so thank you, Steve. At this point, it is a purely digital document. However, pending approval, we will be printing some for the directors and to use as necessary. So we can certainly distribute copies, but in the interest of environmental concerns, we're not blindly doing a large printing as may have been done. But we can certainly get you one, Steve.
Thanks, Ross. And Steve, you're welcome to my copy as well. I read it all on the computer anyway. With that, let's go ahead and put a motion on the table.
So moved. Sorry.
Second
Motion
from
from
Cloverdale.
Director Giudice and a second from Bagby. Let's go ahead and go to comments on the motion, and I'll start with Director Gurney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say for all of us, given how isolated we felt, how delayed a lot of our work has been, I think it's particularly uplifting to recognize our accomplishments during a really difficult year, in fact, 2-year time. So I'm glad to hear the positive part of this. Thank you very much for the annual report.
And Director Gurney, I think, steals the sentiment from all of us. Thank you, Ross, and for the whole team for working on this. It is good to show progress, and it is good to work towards those goals that we've been trying to push out in public in our own communities as well. With that, Drew, if you could please call the vote on the motion to accept the report.
Yes, Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Gurney,
Aye.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Landman.
Aye.
Director Lowe,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins,
Aye.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye.
Passes.
And that passes unanimously. Suzanne, let's move on to item 4.3.
All right, in the spirit of more annual report news, we have the annual report for our measure and sales tax measure that Shauna is going to present to you today.
Suzanne, thank you, Mr. Chair, directors. Let me just get my screen shared here. Hopefully everyone can see the presentation and not my notes.
We got your notes, the display settings.
Okie dokie, thank you, Drew. All righty.
There
That
we
should
go.
be it.
We good.
Perfect. Okay, so the Measure M annual report is being presented to you today for approval. The report was developed in partnership with the Technical Advisory Committee and was recommended for approval by the Citizens Advisory Committee. I'd like to take you through some of the highlights of the document that is included by link in your agenda packet. After approval, the document will be bound and printed and sent out by US Post to the directors. We are debuting our updated Measure M logo, which will allow staff to transition stakeholders and residents from Measure M to Go Sonoma. As a quick refresher, Measure M was enacted in 2005 and will expire in 2025. It's a quarter-cent sales tax measure for transportation and is expected to exceed $30 million annually in 2022. The economy has seen some fairly significant highs and lows over the life of the measure. On this graph, you can see that the actual annual revenues dropped quite a bit under our original projections for a number of years after the Great Recession, but are now exceeding forecast revenues as they did briefly pre-pandemic. Looking at cumulative revenue, or sometimes referred to as the total revenue to date, the measure is still less than forecast in 2004. The market is trending up, but overall, we currently forecast to close out the measure at about 96% of the original 2004 estimate. As many of you are aware, there are 6 primary categories in Measure M: project categories and apportionment categories. The apportionment category includes local streets rehabilitation for 20% of the measure and local bus transit for 10%. And project-specific programs categories include Highway 101, which is 40% of the measure, local streets projects for 20%, bicycle and pedestrian projects for 4%, and rail for 5%. Finally, administration of the entire measure is limited to 1%. Apportionment programs disperse funds directly to the jurisdictions based on 50% population and 50% road mile for local streets rehabilitation, and on the current Transit Development Act, also known as TDA, formula for the local bus transit, but that does exclude Golden Gate Transit. Here you can see some of the photos that were submitted by the jurisdictions depicting how Measure M LSR funds were spent. Starting on the left-hand side, we have a slurry seal in Santa Rosa at West 3rd and Brockhurst, and also at Olive and Barnett. You can see restriping occurring in the unincorporated portion of Sonoma County. We have sidewalks and bike lanes on Cloverdale Boulevard that were installed, and an upgraded pedestrian crossing at Sherman Street and Healdsburg Avenue in Healdsburg. And finally, we have a couple of photos of pavement overlay in Petaluma. Local bus transit funding goes towards operations and is a key source of ongoing service because of the stable and predictable nature of Measure M. Particularly during the public safety shutdown, Measure M provided revenue when fare revenue dropped to unprecedented levels. The bicycle and pedestrian program includes funding for specific projects and included here are photos of the construction of the last segment of Foss Creek Trail. There were 2 segments, segments 7 and 8, which recently celebrated a ribbon cutting ceremony in November after it completed construction. And that makes Foss Creek a fully delivered Measure M project. Highway 101 is another project-specific program in Measure M. You can see here 2 locations under construction in the C2 segment of the Marin Semineros in Petaluma. The project was able to make a major advancement early in the pandemic when traffic levels dropped due to the stay-at-home order. If the project stays on schedule, we should have southbound lanes open by the end of 2022. The local street projects program funded advancement of 3 projects this year. Those were the 116, 121 intersection improvements, construction of phase 1A of the airport avenue improvements, and design and right-of-way of Hearn Avenue interchange improvements. Avenue interchange project is funded with Measure M funds and city funds through design and right-of-way phases, but has been submitted for 100% design plans to Caltrans for approval. The project does not currently have funding for the construction phase. The city applied for federal grant funding unsuccessfully 3 times under federal grants known under the acronyms BUILD and RAISE. The project also was submitted as a candidate for the 2021 SCTA funding program, and staff is working with city on additional funding sources. City staff will be, or SCTA staff will be encouraging city staff to seek SB1 local partnership competitive program monies to help complete the funding plan. Rail program did not have any appropriations this year because SMART is still paying back an interprogram loan with revenues collected for the rail program. So what's next? Measure M will end revenue collection on March 31st of 2025, and Go Sonoma will begin collection on April 1st of the same year. In the years between now and then, SCTA staff will complete another Measure M strategic plan before the end of this fiscal year and begin on a strategic plan for the Go Sonoma measure. In addition, SCTA staff intends to start programming funding into projects as part of the 2021 funding program in the years in which Go Sonoma will be available. And those would be the 25-26 and 26-27 fiscal years. That concludes my presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair and directors.
Thank you so much, Shauna. Board members, do we have any questions? Director Corsi.
The question would be is who's in charge of placing the Measure M signs and letting people know that we're working, their tax dollars are at work out there? And whoever that is, maybe make a suggestion that they don't put them in the bike lane. One of those pictures appeared to have that.
Will do. Thank you, Director. We'll make sure. We do encourage all of the jurisdictions to include Measure M logo on their projects, particularly when they're doing construction, but they are also sometimes included in promotional materials and on their plans. And anything that goes out to the public, they are also included on the website, but I will make sure to tell them not to put them in the bike lane.
Thank you, Shauna.
Thank you, Director. Let's go to Director Kelly.
Thank you, Chair Rogers. I just wanted to ask Shauna, could you repeat, you said we were at the beginning of the presentation expected to exceed the revenue projection for this year. Did you say 32 million?
It was about 30 million.
30, okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a question as well, Shauna, just sort of following back up on that. You said that by the time the measure expires, we expect to have received about 96% of the projected revenue, which actually sounds pretty decent. What is that 4%? Remind me what the shortfall of that 4% is in terms of real dollars.
In terms of real dollars. Okay, that I don't have in my head, but I probably should. I'm sure James will correct me, but I can tell you that there are projects that we're not expecting to move all the way forward, so those will probably take up the slack. So there will be, we're hoping that there will be funding to fund all the projects that want to go forward.
I think it's somewhere around $8 million. I don't know if James is, that's my back of the envelope calculation. You're
We can't
muted.
hear you, James.
I apologize. So the total sales tax measure is about 470 million. So if you look at a 4% drop, it's about an $18.8 million shortfall. Now of that, the apportionment programs come off the top and go straight, direct to the jurisdictions that are implementing those. So when you look at the actual project impacts, you're really talking about your local street projects and your bicycle and pedestrian project lists that we're looking to implement. And those are actually only 24% of the sales tax measure. So if you were to then take that amount and look at just the project program impacts, now you're about $4.5 million impacts to those project lists, because 101 we've delivered on and the other money goes straight to those jurisdictions.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. Let's go to public comment on item 4.3.
I don't see any members of the public with their hands up, Chair Rogers.
All right, I'll bring it back and I'll see if anybody wants to put a motion on the table to accept the report.
So moved.
Moved by Director Kelly. How about a second?
I'll second.
And a second from Director Fisher. Any other comments from the board? All right, Drew, please call the vote.
On the motion from Director Kelly, Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Gurney,
Aye.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Landman,
Aye.
Director Lowe,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins,
Yes.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shauna. Suzanne, let's go on to item 4.4.
All right, item 4.4 is related to our work with Caltrans and the funding program they manage. That's the big maintenance program for the state highway system called the State Highway Operations and Protection Program. It is approved every 2 years by the state, and we often comment upon it. So I will hand it over to James to give you an update on the status of the 2022 shop.
Thank you, Suzanne. So the 2022 SHOP program is for state highway only. It is a combination of state and federal funds. Caltrans manages the program itself. The focus is primarily on maintenance and safety. While the opportunities for partnering are limited, there are opportunities there for this board's consideration. The restrictions on the program include that you must be in their 10-year plan. You have to have what's called a PID, which is a project initiation document for the project to be programmed in their 2-year funding cycle. So we're talking about the 2022 shop. Right now, there'll be the 2024, and in the past, we brought you the 2020 shop. In July of last year, this board wrote a letter to Caltrans requesting 9 projects be incorporated in the 2022 shop. Of those 9 projects, none of them were incorporated in. They did include projects that were on Highway 12, 116, 121, and projects on State Route 37 as well, primarily focusing on those state highways that impact the local jurisdictions as opposed to the freeway system where you access controlled. The requests included, wider shoulders for evacuation routes and safety to, complete streets implementation. But that primary focus of maintenance and safety and limited funding available resulted in none of those projects. Now, it is a very robust list that includes $273 million of investment in our state highway system in Sonoma County. That list is included on pages 158 through 168 in your packet. Keep in mind, though, that is what is being considered and part of the 2022 shop. For a complete shop list, you'd have to go to the activities report that's included in your packet monthly that is on pages 215 through 225 for the overall overview of the shop. With that being said, Staff's looking for the board to provide any additional comments on those 9 projects. Those 9 projects are in your packet on page 149. I can pull it up and share a screen if anyone would like to review the list directly. And then to direct staff to continue to advocate for inclusion of those projects in future funding cycles. And then also to direct staff to bring this item back to the SCTA board in 2023 to continue to advocate for that next funding cycle in 2024. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, James. Are there any questions from the board? Director Landman.
Thank you, Chair Rogers. That sounds good. Yeah, I'm almost embarrassed having to ask this of staff. Having been around for some years, I should know this offhand. But as I read this staff report and recognized that after having given the required recommendations, areas of interest to them, that none of them were selected, I wonder if I could ask, what is historically the rough ratio of SHOP requests to be included versus not for us? And how does that compare to other regions? Do we have a rough idea? My sense has always been, of course, that this is underfunded, oversubscribed, that you don't get everything you want, and I fully expect that. But I was a little surprised at the complete shutout without any feedback why every single submission we made was left out. So I'm curious to understand how much of an anomaly this is, assuming it is one. And I wanted to ask, if our input then isn't used, even though it does say in the staff report that there is some requirement of that or expectation of that, then where does the SHOP input come from to Caltrans? Are we being end around it in some way, in some fashion? I'm not really sure how that happens. And finally, certainly I'd be supportive, since we're asking for feedback from the board members, of, again, sending a polite letter supporting our 9 identified areas of interest, particularly the ones that have their project initiation documents completed. That seems very logical. And I'm just wondering if sending a polite but firm letter requesting that they utilize our requests, since we are the representative voice for this county, both municipal and rural, I'm wondering if that would be helpful. So if we could just get some general feedback to understand that, because I was somewhat surprised when I read this report, and I wondered how it came to be in this situation. Thank you.
Yeah, the SHOP has gone through definitely many different cycles of being very responsive to the SCTA director's requests, and then being non-responsive. The typical excuse that we get from Caltrans is simply a lack of funding. And so when an intersection that the SCTA board of directors is interested in seeing improvements, if there's a safety index, if there's a number of accidents that has occurred, this is something where Caltrans can be very responsive and included. When it comes to the improvements that are requested, which is what the majority of this list is, Caltrans's other response would be, these projects are more geared towards a STIP improvement, a state transportation improvement program, which are the state funds that the SCTA board has input on, of which there was some programming that we did last year to some local projects, and we actually chose to use those dollars off of the state highway, making local improvements as opposed to state highway improvements. The other part of your question was with regard to how these decisions are made and what Caltrans does to develop this list. It is geared towards being a transparent process. It has in the past been described as mysterious or unknown. And Caltrans has made a distinct effort to try to, discover the mysteries of the SHOP, or, what's happening within the SHOP. And they've done it even more so with the Prop 1B component of funds that goes into the SHOP, because there's transparency measures built into Prop 1B. So you have a situation where the SHOP itself has multiple different funding sources, both state, federal. Some of that state is Prop 1B. It creates more transparency at the California Transportation Commission, holding Caltrans accountable for those funds. So if they were to never get any input from us as locals, they have several plans that build into it. They have a transportation asset management plan, they have a strategic highways plan, then they have a 10-year SHOP plan. All of these plans are developed by Caltrans, approved by the California Transportation Commission, and circulated publicly. And then eventually those plans feed into the project initiation document that then feeds into the programming event. So we try to insert ourselves as much as possible and provide the feedback to make Caltrans aware of what our priorities are. And, we can do a follow-up letter, reinforcing these 9 projects that are listed.
Yeah, just not to belabor this, but it would be useful to have better feedback, I think, because at my level, it doesn't appear transparent. I'm sure if I knew where and how to dig before this meeting, or we had a packet that was 3 times bigger, you could probably provide us with that. And you probably don't want to do that. We probably don't want to read it. But it would be good to know, because as I look at this, I'd like to know what guidelines were used that rose these projects and ignored every single project that, again, the voice of transportation funding in this county suggested. That would be pretty valuable to have. There should be some feedback at least on why these were selected. The argument that there isn't money certainly doesn't hold water, because there is money that's being invested, and I'm grateful for that. I guess I'd lastly ask you, do our projects lean a little bit towards the STIP a bit here? Is that perhaps a valid concern?
Yes, they tend to lead more towards the STIP, but there's been recent strong efforts for any sort of improvements to include complete streets in the shop,
Yes.
so that you're not sort of work out there without addressing the entire road, right? The public doesn't care what the fund source is. If you're coming in, you're doing major improvements, address everything that needs to be addressed. So Caltrans is headed that direction. And they're aware of our request that they have here. So it's a matter of, they could address these complete street features that we're asking for, as long as there's some sort of major paving that they have to do, or some sort of safety that they have to address in the area. There's opportunities to have them fund those other components through the shop.
Thank you.
If there's
Yeah, I think that's helpful. That makes it more clear. I just, in the future, I would love to see if it's possible from them. And I know they're a huge agency and have a lot of work to do, but some general feedback, particularly when they ignore every single recommendation we make, to give us a sense of why, that would be helpful, so we can all work together better in the future. Thank you for taking the time to answer that.
If I could add just one additional part to that. James is saying it probably more nicely than I'm about to. This has been the least communicative shop cycle we've had in a decade, and it's frustrating statewide. So I think, Director Landman, your comments are being made throughout other parts of the region and the state, and there's just a general frustration of not gaps in communication, I guess is the best way I could frame it, from Caltrans through the shop cycle.
That's helpful to hear too, because I thought I picked that up in the staff report. If we could just politely include that direction in our response, that we share this concern with many of our colleagues, I think that would be helpful, maybe, if staff and the rest of my colleagues concur. Thank you for filling that out further. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Director. Let's go to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Rogers. My questions were actually very much in line with Director Landman's, which is, just sort of, honestly, it felt like a very opaque process in terms of Caltrans and how they make their decisions and how they make their funding. But one additional question I have is, are there any other opportunities beyond sort of the PID or the SHOP funds to do work? It's something that I noted that I brought up before, sort of the state of Highway 116 north of Sebastopol and west of Sebastopol, and the fact that they just kind of keep paving it in little tiny chunks, but then that means that the chunks in between the tiny chunks that they pave it are then also growing grass and potholes. And I think that ultimately what's really needed is more culvert and drainage work to really make sure that the water is actually getting off the road and not just pooling there. So I'm just wondering, are there any other opportunities to provide input on, say, general maintenance or simple repaving? And then I also wanted to echo Director Landman's sort of remarks around bike pathways. Are there any other ways that we can get just simple striping if there already is, sort of space in the right of way? How do we move forward with really looking at a bike network that connects, our county road systems, our city road systems, and then those that are overseen by Caltrans?
With regard to the culverts, the paving, the shop is the spot, right? That is where that fund source is going to come from. With regard to the other improvements, it really comes down to that list of funds that are within our 2021 funding program, primarily which is those STIP funds to make actual improvements. And then you'd have to have, in the area that you've referenced, it would be, county TPW staff to potentially implement projects. With regard to projects that Caltrans implements directly, I would really refer to the shop again, but then I would want to defer to that. When you talk about that roadway network, that overall network, right? I'd pass it to Suzanne to talk about maybe some of the work that Dana Ture from our staff has been doing on the statewide or District 4 bike plan, as well as the work that we're looking to do countywide, including all the jurisdictions on a countywide plan.
Yeah, I just to add to that, our plans are to update our countywide bike and pedestrian plan starting this year. We're waiting to hear on a Caltrans grant in March to see whether we will do a more robust effort or do an internal staff-driven effort to update that plan. And I think some of the discussion around that plan is going to be not just taking the list of projects that jurisdictions give us, which we will take those, but also thinking about how to make those connections work and what that network really should look like. And so taking more of that regional view towards it and developing perhaps an additional list of projects or augmenting the project list we do get from the jurisdictions.
One quick follow-up question, if I may, through the chair, just are there ever any opportunities to partner with Caltrans on, say, seeking federal funding or, sort of like, I'm just trying to think of ways. I feel like it sounds like there are a number of projects in various jurisdictions related to Caltrans that we're unable to get through. Are there any other potential funding sources?
In terms of partnering with Caltrans, there are programs like the Solutions for Congested Corridor program or the Trade Corridor program or the Active Transportation program that are all statewide competitive, or in some cases have a regionally competitive component. And that money comes through Caltrans, but it's not really partnering with them. I guess it is, because we offer up a project, we provide some matching funds, they give us, the state provides some money, and then you go forward. The shop is really the big pot of money that the state controls. It's where the bulk of the federal gas tax money goes, that isn't designated to specific programs. And it is definitely possible to partner with them on projects in the shop, but it's a little bit more challenging. Like we did do that with the 116, 121 intersection. That's a big example. I'm a little, I don't want to say confused, but I'm a little unsure how the state is looking at the shop for active transportation. There was kind of a to-do made a year or two ago about including active transportation projects in the shop. And that's one of the reasons you see those projects on this included in this list of 9. There are some components that are more bike ped related. And I don't know how they're doing that or how they're making decisions around that or how they're partnering on that. It is opaque, but I think that's somewhere I would like to explore a little bit more, is if we have a specific project, say on 116, how we could use some local money to get it ready to go and then seek some shop money for the construction component.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. Director Giudice.
Thank you, Chair. So the criteria that Caltrans uses is safety in order to fund the shop programs. Is that the overriding criteria?
It talks about core assets and focuses on core assets. Safety is by far Caltrans' #1 priority, right? So it's come first, and safety is even an exception to the 2-year funding program. So if you have a major safety concern, they will fund it immediately and not wait for.
Yeah, I'll note. Sorry, thank you. But just a follow up on that would be, there are probably a lot of projects along the Caltrans territory that involve homelessness. At least there are in Roanoke Park, and there are huge safety concerns, in particular at the Roanoke Crossing as it interfaces our homeless shelter. And I'm just curious, maybe, moving forward, if we could possibly identify projects that interface with Caltrans properties that involve homelessness, because there's a huge concern with homelessness in several areas. Just a thought.
Is there physical improvements that we should be adding to this list, or is this more of an operational issues that we should make Caltrans maintenance aware of?
Well, I think both, but probably physical issues. In our case down at Roanoke Park, it was the fact that Caltrans did not coordinate the removal of a homeless encampment that forced them into a very dangerous spot along the smart line. And there was no coordination with our jurisdiction whatsoever. And so that created a huge issue for us.
All right, thank you, Director. Seeing no other hands, we'll go to public comment on this item. Again, if you're interested in providing any comment on item 4.4, hit the raise hand feature on Zoom.
Confirming, I don't see any members of the public wishing to speak on this item right now.
I don't either, Drew, so we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board. James, before I look for a motion, can you frame for us one more time what type of direction would be helpful from the board?
The direction would be to confirm that the 9 lists or the 9 projects that are on there should continue, and if there's anything to add, to add that. And then based on the discussion that I heard, the direction would be to follow up with a letter that these are SCTA's priority, and to please, provide us more feedback on why they weren't selected and how we can work together to get them selected in the future.
All right, thank you. I'll go to Director Landman.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make that motion. I wanted to make it all caps and sign in an angry marker squall, but I'll settle for our typical way of doing it.
All right, we've got a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
All right, so motion from Director Landman with a second from Director Giudice. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? All right, seeing done, Drew, can you call the vote?
Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Gurney,
Aye.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Landman,
Aye.
Director Lowe,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins,
Aye.
and then Chair Rogers.
Aye. Looks like that passes unanimously. So we'll keep moving through our meeting to item 4.5. Madam Executive Director, do you want to take it away?
I will briefly take it away. I'm really excited to be before you today and hand this over to the team that has been working on the Vision Zero Action Plan. So it's SCTA staff Janet Spillman, Laurel Chambers from Department of Health Services, and then Quinn Kelly from our consultant team from Toole Design. So Janet, it's all yours.
Good afternoon. Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, equitable mobility for all. In 2019, the SCTA and the Department of Health Services received a Sustainable Communities grant from Caltrans to develop a data dashboard for Sonoma County and for a Vision Zero action plan. The project is guided by the Vision Zero Advisory Committee and by the many participants who attended meetings or filled out our surveys. As Suzanne mentioned, Laurel Chambers of DHS and Quinn Kelly of Toole Design will both make presentations. Laurel will give you an update of the overall project, and Quinn will provide a walkthrough on the action plan. The action plan engagement is still ongoing, and we will be taking comments on the action plan until February 21st. So today, this is an informational item. The action plan will be brought back to the SCTA in March for approval, and individual and jurisdictions are encouraged to make use of the toolkit that will come out of this project in order to raise awareness and take action in their own cities. And so with that, I pass it on to Laurel.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So the Vision Zero approach is a little different than the traditional approach to traffic safety. Serious crashes are not something we should accept as inevitable. Instead, a public health approach sees traffic deaths as preventable. Traffic crashes also do not affect all communities equally, and Vision Zero seeks an equitable investment to address disparities. Vision Zero asserts that human drivers will always be imperfect and make mistakes, but we can take steps to make sure that those mistakes don't cost lives. Vision Zero focuses on fatal and severe crashes, the ones that tear families and lives apart, rather than those that cause only property damage. And lastly, collective responsibility through a safe systems approach is the foundation of Vision Zero. Next slide. So this screenshot might look familiar to you. We have presented to this board before on our data dashboard that we created for the project. Vision Zero is a data-driven effort. The dashboard is key in analyzing crash data to show us how and where people are being seriously injured or killed, which then allows us to prioritize roads and intersections and strategies. And this data dashboard will be ongoing and will be updated at least annually to incorporate the latest crash data. The hope is that it will continue to be used to make decisions moving forward. Next slide. So we know that there are disparities in access to transportation, disparities in traffic enforcement, and in crash victims. The project uses the MTC Equity Priority Communities and Cal EnviroScreen to show the correlation between Sonoma County's most dangerous roadways and its most underserved communities. And that's very clear in the data dashboard. And it will be clear in the plan as well. Next slide. So like Janet mentioned, our project kicked off in December 2019. So virtually the entire project has been done during COVID times, which has necessitated quite a change in thinking around engagement. And we've had to pivot on some things, but even despite COVID and all of the restrictions, we've managed to do quite a bit of community engagement. First and foremost, the Vision Zero Advisory Committee, which is made up of representatives from each jurisdiction, as well as biking and transportation advocates, residents, law enforcement, among others, have been really key in promoting Vision Zero, generating public engagement, bringing back feedback, and really engaging their communities. We've also done 2 large community surveys, which I'll talk a little bit more about, as well as 3 focus groups. Stakeholder interviews with numerous stakeholders. We did a virtual county-wide public workshop, as well as repeated presentations at transportation-related public boards. And then I also wanted to mention the comprehensive transportation plan listening sessions. Traffic safety emerged repeatedly as an issue during SCTA's listening sessions for the 2021 comprehensive transportation plan. And feedback from those listening sessions really mirrors the results from the surveys and our own focus groups and interviews. We're hearing the same things over and over again from our community. Next slide. Our first survey, which I presented results on back in November 2020. We launched the first survey in July of 2020 and promoted it throughout that summer and fall. And it really laid the foundation for community engagement. But then we did a second survey, which built on the findings of the first survey to drill deeper into public perceptions of traffic safety. The second survey also allowed respondents to map their daily travel patterns and identify specific areas on a map where they feel unsafe, which added an important layer to the survey results. And I'll show that in a couple slides. So this slide has the results of the question, what are the most important traffic safety issues facing Sonoma County today? People were allowed to choose their top 3. The number 1 issue cited was poorly maintained roads, bike lanes, and sidewalks, followed by speeding and then distracted driving. So based on this feedback, specific goals were developed to eliminate distracted driving, create safer speeds, and to build and maintain safe streets for all. And Quinn will get into those specific goals in a minute. Next slide. When asked what measures are most important to make Sonoma County safer for all road users, 67% of respondents selected more enhanced safety features like protected bike lanes and streets designed to slow traffic. In comparison, 24% selected more enforcement and harsher penalties for speeding, DUI, and other infractions, and 10% selected more education and outreach to teach people safe habits. These responses suggest that many people in Sonoma County would prioritize building better infrastructure over more enforcement and education-oriented measures. We also found that most respondents did not feel safe walking, biking, or rolling in Sonoma County, with even lower perceptions of safety among people of color and those living outside city limits. More than half of respondents feel it is not safe to drive, bike, or walk on Sonoma's rural roads, and the data dashboard does bear that out. Next slide. So as part of the survey, like I mentioned, people were allowed to place pins for their most common trips, and also place pins in danger zones and safe spots for traffic safety throughout the county. This slide shows a heat map of the danger zones overlaid on our high injury network, which are those orange lines. So as you can see, there's a substantial overlap between the respondents' danger zones and the high injury network. People feel unsafe on the roads that are in fact unsafe. Next slide. As part of this project, we conducted 3 focus groups, one with mobility and disability rights advocates, and 2 with Spanish-speaking folks from Santa Rosa and Sonoma Valley. The mobility focus group, the main takeaway there was that accessibility is a safety issue. There were a number of concerns cited, such as ramps, lack of ramps in the wrong places, signal locations, where the push button signals are located on poles can be an issue for people. Also protected lanes came up. People in wheelchairs or motorized wheelchairs will often use bike lanes, and they've reported that drivers often have a problem with this, but they've never had an issue with bikers having a problem with that. So that was interesting. They also cited accessible parking and driver behavior as issues. With the Spanish focus groups, there were several high-level takeaways I wanted to mention. One is that people felt like the infrastructure does not support safe and inclusive spaces for community members. There was a strong desire for more bike paths and also more pedestrian-friendly streets. People feel discouraged and unheard sometimes when trying to communicate concerns about road safety to cities and county. And also that there was a feeling expressed that public transportation is often too expensive, slow, and feels inaccessible. Many people in the focus groups reported that they would rather walk instead of taking public transportation because it's faster. And so really underscoring the need for pedestrian-friendly streets. Next slide. So this is a list of the stakeholders that were interviewed as part of the project. As you can see, we spoke to representatives from all of the cities and towns in Sonoma County, many of them more than once throughout the project, multiple interviews, as well as transit operators, bike advocates, healthcare, police, highway patrol, Sonoma County tourism, and others. And there were even more that we wanted to interview, but we didn't have a chance to get to. Next slide. And then last, I'll talk about the virtual public workshop, which was held on January 25th. We had over 40 attendees. And this workshop built on previous engagement efforts by presenting initial findings and providing an opportunity for community feedback on the Vision Zero action plan. In order to create a culture of safety, participants favored expanding Safe Roads to School programs, and to build safe streets, participants favored street design standards and building more bike lanes and sidewalks. We had a number of public comments, very thoughtful public comments on a lot of different issues. People talked about potholes, the need for better maintained roads, especially bike lanes, the need for more protected bike lanes and walking paths, even policies to limit the size of cars. There was a recommendation to expand safe routes to school, recommendation to increase enforcement and to look into speed cameras, incorporating action plan goals into each city's general plans and climate initiatives also came up in the public comments. So that wraps up a summary of our engagement efforts for the project. I'm going to turn it over to Quinn to talk about the plan.
Thank you, Laurel. Yeah, so as you may have gathered, traffic fatalities and severe injuries is an issue that really requires a sustained and coordinated effort across many organizations and jurisdictions. Based on what we've heard from the public and key stakeholders and what we see in the data for Sonoma County, we propose a prioritized set of actions across 6 major goal areas. I won't read through these, but for each of these high-level goals, I've included a sample of actions included in the plan. Some of them have more than we really have time to get into today, but yes. And so the actions under each goal that are listed first in bold text are those that were prioritized by the Vision Zero Action Committee, Advisory Committee rather. Next slide. So creating safe speeds is a key element of any Vision Zero effort. Higher speeds increase both the risk of a crash and the likelihood that a crash will result in severe injury or death. Over the past 5 years, speeding drivers caused over 4,000 crashes, leading to 200 severe injuries and 29 deaths in Sonoma County. And it's important to note that high-speed roads, regardless of whether the driver is traveling above the speed limit, are a risk factor. Travel speeds of 40 to 45 miles an hour see a notably elevated rate of fatal and severe injury crashes relative to lower speeds. Next. These are our 2 actions for creating safer speeds. So action 1.1 is really about making sure that speeds are set appropriately and that any reduction to speed limits is accompanied by traffic calming and other design changes to lower the speed at which drivers will naturally travel. This is something that came up in some of our stakeholder interviews with law enforcement is, it's great to lower speeds where needed, but you have to make sure that, that drivers are actually encouraged to drive those speeds through other design changes. Action 1.2 is about reducing speed limits to 25 or lower where it makes sense, and is sort of relying on the recently passed state legislation AB 43, which will give local cities and counties more authority to set speed limits. Next slide. The next high-level goal in the plan is about curbing impaired driving. And so this is about creating transportation alternatives for people who are consuming alcohol, preventing those with a pattern of impaired driving from getting behind the wheel, and addressing the root causes of alcohol and drug abuse. Next. So here's a sampling of some of our impaired driving actions. So having law enforcement engage with businesses around responsible beverage service. Action 2.2 is really about making sure that visitors are traveling in a safe way between local wineries and breweries. And then action 2.5 is about expanding transportation services to include more nighttime hours. This is something that local transit agencies have really already identified a need for, but obviously a matter of funding. Nighttime transportation services could be delivered through on-demand or microtransit options. And they also have a huge benefit for people who work irregular hours, seniors, young people, people who don't feel comfortable driving at night. Next slide. So the next high-level goal is creating a culture of safety. This goal is about instilling a sense of shared responsibility, and many of the actions focus on youth and young drivers to help develop the next generation of responsible road users. Next slide. So these actions really focus on building on existing successful efforts, including the Safe Routes to School program, Impact Teen Drivers, and other programs that help create the next generation of responsible road users. I want to call attention to Action 3.2, which also emphasizes the need to work with media partners to shift the narrative away from victim blaming and toward an acknowledgement of systemic traffic safety issues. Next slide. So yeah, as you saw from the survey, this is perhaps one of the most important goals, identified so by 67% of respondents. So streets should be designed to encourage safe behavior and to reduce conflict between users. And we're looking at dozens of potential engineering countermeasures that have been proven to reduce the quantity and severity of crashes. Next slide. So there's 12 actions included under this goal. So I've just included the top priority ones here. Action 4.1 focuses on implementing quick build projects to rapidly and inexpensively implement bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements along the high injury network. Action 4.2 calls on local jurisdictions to complete a local road safety plan. The LRSP is really one of the most important beginning steps toward identifying safety issues and also identifying the countermeasures most effective for addressing those. And Action 4.3 identifies the need to create a dedicated funding stream for Vision Zero safety projects and to concentrate those projects in equity priority communities. Next slide. So I've included this graphic to show the kind of transformation we're envisioning for Sonoma County streets and roads. So this is the before condition where you see long crossing distances, sidewalk gaps, wide curb radii, et cetera. And then if you go to the next slide, design changes like adding pedestrian refuge islands, closing sidewalk gaps. These things can really go a long way toward reducing the pedestrian and bicycle crashes that are most likely to result in a death or severe injury, and also calming all drivers in a way that increases safety across the board. Next slide. This next goal, goal number 5, is about reducing private vehicle use and improving the safety of vehicles, particularly large trucks. And this goal is also, helps reduce the frequency as well as the severity of crashes. Next goal, next slide. Action 5.1 identifies reducing VMT as an important component of Vision Zero efforts. The less you have folks driving out on the road, the less exposure there is, the less crashes you're going to have. Action 5.2 also acknowledges the need to incorporate safety features, particularly on fleet vehicles, including side guards on large trucks like you see in the sketch on this slide, that keep pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists from being run over by a large truck's rear wheels during a side impact crash. Next slide. And our last high-level goal is about improving data for effective decision-making. As Laura alluded to, the data dashboard has already taken a huge step toward this. And this plan just wants to identify ways to further improve that data and to get it into the hands of decision makers. Next slide. So data priorities include training law enforcement officers to conduct more detailed and thorough crash reports and investigations, particularly for crashes involving pedestrians and bicycle riders. This will improve the accuracy of crash data analysis, such as the one that informed the recommendations in this plan. And also, because 30% of crashes are not reported to law enforcement, we're proposing to collect additional data from hospitals and trauma centers. Next slide. So as part of our toolkit to help Sonoma County reach its Vision Zero goal, we're including a sample resolution for local jurisdictions. This resolution encourages them to commit to the hard work, encourages all of us to commit to the hard work of eliminating traffic deaths and injuries, providing a menu of actions that can be taken at the local level to build safer streets and curb dangerous driving behavior. Next slide. Also, as part of that toolkit, we're including a progress tracker that local jurisdictions can use to track their progress toward Vision Zero goals. The data collected for the tracker will feed into a report card that can be shared with the public to showcase efforts and progress. And it will be aggregated by SCTA and reported through the countywide Vision Zero story map and data dashboard to track countywide progress. Next slide. And finally, for individuals, we created the Vision Zero Safety Pledge, which is an individual commitment to safe driving behavior. We invite you all to take the safety pledge if you would click at scta.ca.gov/vz/pledge. That will show up on the screen, Drew, if you click, I think. So yeah, with that, I thank you for your time and attention. And at this point, I will give the floor back to Janet to discuss next steps.
Thanks, Quinn. So there you have our presentation. We are making changes still to the plan as we continue to receive feedback until February 14th. I mean, that's today, February 21st. And again, it'll be back before you in a month. So with that, I conclude our report.
Thank you so much, Janet, Laurel, and Quinn. As you just mentioned, this is an informational item. We'll start with questions from our board members, starting with Director Bagby.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have two different questions. I think I'm going to try to ask what I hope is the easiest question first. And the first one was, you mentioned on Action Plan 4.2, the local road safety program. And sorry, Quinn, this may be a question more for SCTA staff. Something that's kind of come up in discussions earlier today. I'm just wondering how the local road safety program dovetails with the complete streets program that Caltrans is now requiring for our cities to complete for local funding. Do you want to try to answer that one first? Because it's my second question is pretty different. Or through the chair, whoever we want to handle that.
Okay, so those, all of those various elements work together. They get more and more specific as they get to the project level analysis. The complete streets should work well with the overall Vision Zero goals.
Well, I guess, yeah, and specifically, so I guess I'm just my question is, how specific does that local road safety program, which looked like it was a kind of, is it kind of a formal thing, or were we just throwing in an acronym because we do that?
They're real plans that are happening in many of the communities that are very specific.
Okay, because it just seems like there should be a lot of there logically should be a lot of overlap there.
I think James is still on here. He might be able to be more explicit about the use of the local road safety plan versus the
complete streets.
The complete streets.
Okay.
Yeah, so the complete streets is going to be a requirement of, essentially all the projects moving forward, right? So there's a complete streets checklist, complete streets requirement, right? The local road safety plan is really the specific plan, which think of the Vision Zero as more your general plan, then your local roads safety plan is more of your specific plan that then allows you to program the HSIPs, the highway safety program funds, right? So that's kind of the separation. They're both becoming requirements under the new OBAG 3 requirements that MTC is implementing. So right now, MTC is saying, okay, to be eligible for funds, you have to have a local road safety plan or equivalent. But for this round, my understanding is MTC's interpretation is if you do have a Vision Zero plan for the entire county, we would accept that as an equivalent. So,
okay, so that's kind of what I'm asking is, how do we check those boxes as small cities? That you got to the heart of my question, James.
So, and what I'm trying to say to you is that I believe that box is checked for now, but it may not be checked 4 or 5 years from now when the next round of OBAG comes out. They may require that jurisdiction specific LRSP at that point, as opposed to just being part of a Vision Zero plan. But that's a policy decision that will be much further down the road.
Thank you. And is it through the chair? Can I ask my kind of separate question? I was sort of, it was intrigued, Quinn, about the section where you were talking about, driver safety and responsibility, because, and honestly, one of the challenges that we have faced in Cloverdale is we're really a transportation desert. In fact, our Cloverdale Senior Center is in the midst of trying to put together a driver program, and they're trying to do a hybrid where there would be a van service to popular, destinations, especially medical destinations in Santa Rosa. But there's also a real need for, door-to-door services. Right now, we don't seem to have any Uber drivers. We don't have any Lyft drivers. We don't have a taxi that is serving Cloverdale right now. So there's a real need, and the Senior Center identified it because they actually had a really good seniors helping seniors with a car program. And one of the things that they really came up against is one of the issues that you brought up in the presentation, which was driver safety. If somebody had a late appointment or shopping went late or something like that, you had seniors who were volunteering to drive other seniors who weren't comfortable driving at night when it was sometimes necessary, or driving in the morning. And so I think that this is really highlighting a lot of the, transportation challenges that we have in the more rural areas that aren't, we're certainly serviced by Sonoma County Transit, where the free shuttle is really popular here in Cloverdale, but bus service just doesn't cut it for certain kinds of trips. And one of the ways that we were trying to address that with volunteer service, those drivers don't feel comfortable in all of these areas, and there's actually kind of an opportunity for younger drivers. So I'm just wondering if there was any mention of this issue, because we're so far out in Cloverdale, and I'm sure that coastal communities are very similar. When you have volunteers trying to, or even family members trying to help people get to where they're going, they are having driver safety issues because they themselves, under certain conditions, consider themselves to be impaired. So I'm just wondering if that topic around, aging populations in rural areas came up, amongst the survey or some of the public meetings.
Yeah, it absolutely came up. Yeah, it's been something we've heard again and again, and I think there's a lot of overlap between a lot of the initiatives that would fall under Vision Zero and initiatives that are related, to mobility justice more broadly, and especially towards serving groups that have historically been underserved. So I think there's a lot of alignment and momentum between these two efforts.
All right, thank you, Director. Board, I do want to do a quick time check and point out we're almost to 4 o'clock. So let's make sure we're keeping things to questions for now before public comment. And with that, we'll go to Director Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Rogers. Quick question about the data dashboard. How often is that updated? And are you going to be using then the data you gather from trauma centers and so on and putting that in there? And then a second question I'll go ahead and ask, and that's about the heat map. I found myself the overlay of that data with the survey data, wanting myself to drill into Petaluma and get more granular on my community, and obviously wasn't able to do that, and wondering if that can be provided to us so that our jurisdictions can see the results of the survey as it overlays with the data dashboard.
I'm so happy you asked. Oh, go ahead, Janet.
I'll answer the first question about the data dashboard, which is that we have not gotten to the level yet where we can get data from hospitals. It's an aspiration, a goal of ours. Right now, all of the data for the data dashboard comes from a compilation of state highway information, SWITers. And so we get that is updated yearly, and that we will continue to do that until we can get more information to add to the collection in the data dashboard. And Quinn, did you have more to say about that?
Oh, I was just going to add that we're planning on making those interactive maps of the survey data responses that can also be overlaid with the high injury network available as part of this effort. So.
Got it. Yeah. Can I ask a follow-up question on that? I was under the impression that the data dashboard data came from our local law enforcement.
It does, but via the statewide SWITRs, the statewide traffic data system.
So it goes up through there. Okay, got it. And another just observation that I really think this report should stress the narrowing of lanes, because it is the wider lane apparently that really makes drivers feel as though they can go faster. So it's not just about the street trees or the other amenities, but really the width of those lanes. And along with that, asked a question in the executive committee about whether we're looking at designing roads for trucks and big vehicles, or whether we're wanting to keep those out of our downtowns and our places where people are more vulnerable, and whether that was even looked at, like enforcing truck routes as a concept. So yeah, just want to put that out there as something I really think we should be stressing. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. We'll go to Director Lowe.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you accidentally muted there.
I accidentally muted there. Having recently had conversations in the community regarding the striping of protected bike lanes, it was really fun. I recommend it. That, you know, we had a lot of pushback, obviously, from the community. It's big change. But my question is more to the public safety. We had comments from police and fire regarding the difficulty that they might have with those protected bike lanes because of I believe they're called bollards, but I could be saying that wrong or using the wrong term, so I apologize in advance for that. But if you could tell me how that configuration, how we've worked with other safety entities in determining and recommending, because it became a bit of a stumbling block when you have fire saying this would make it more difficult for us to get into a building or put out a fire or something like that. Just what is what avenues have you used to reach out to specifically fire with regard to that configuration? Thank you.
Yeah, I have worked extensively with emergency responders during the design of protected bike lane projects and other sorts of roadway improvements. And it's certainly critical, to get them involved in the design process early on. And it's entirely possible to design all of those facilities in such a way that they facilitate and even improve emergency response operations. For example, the flexible bollards you referred to, some fire departments might not be used to them, but they're actually designed in such a way that a fire truck can easily just run them over if they need to, access anything that's on the other side of them. I mean, they're designed to be run over. So, yeah.
Thank you. I for those of you pursuing this or going forward, I think that would be an essential part of the conversation, because it certainly was in Sonoma. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Director. We'll go to the Vice Chair for questions.
Thank you. I think my first question is, how can we engage in this process going forward? Because this document is fantastic. And I think I, like Director Fisher, wanted to immediately jump into the nitty-gritty details and the nitty-gritty solutions and challenges. So could you just sort of share opportunities for engagement in the future? And then I have a couple other follow-up questions that I'll try to keep brief.
Do you want to
Okay,
take that, Janet? Or?
sure. So the hope is that you all become Vision Zero champions, along with the Vision Zero Advisory Committee, which is representative of the entire county, and with the so we're here to support them wherever we can.
Great. And then follow-up question, I immediately thought, of course, of a few barriers to implementation, particularly in my neck of the woods. The 85% rule kills us. I have sat through so many community meetings where I had to tell people, no, we can't lower the speed limit. If we do a study, it's likely to go up, not down. And if we do lower the speed limit arbitrarily, we are basically creating a speed trap that becomes unenforceable by CHP. Also, by the way, CHP actually has a total of 3 officer teams in all of Sonoma County overnight, which is one of those key sort of areas where we've seen a lot of the impaired drivers and unfortunately fatalities on rural roads. So I guess how could we sort of tackle some of these barriers to implementation? I've read through the state law. It unfortunately doesn't help a lot of our challenges out in rural Sonoma County because we're not sort of near schools or certain things. We don't check the boxes to be able to lower the speed limits. And is there an opportunity for advocacy at a state level? We basically live in a might rate makes right world where 85% of drivers drive a certain speed. That's the de facto speed limit, which is crazy to me because it doesn't take into account that group that is unfortunately so overrepresented in fatalities in Sonoma County, which are bikes and pedestrians. So what about sort of challenges that we know exist? Is there a way to catalyze around solutions to overcome some of these barriers, in particular lack of enforcement and the inability to control speed limits?
Great questions.
Trying to come up with a good answer to it as well. These are big issues, and I think that we're going to need to. It's bigger than us. These are statewide issues, so it may require legislation.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair. We'll go to Director Corsi.
Oh, thank you. Actually, Director Hopkins asked the question that I wanted to ask about the 85%. It's stupid. It's easier to raise speed limits than to lower them. So I'm happy to work with anybody on advocacy on that front.
All right, thank you. Seeing no other hands, we'll go to public comment on the item. I do see at least one to start us off.
All right. Excuse me. Also, I just want to note that I received about 9 pre-submitted public comments on this item. I did provide them to the Board of Directors as well as posted them online on the SCTA website. And so with that, we will start with Steve Bertelbaugh. Steve, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Chair Rogers and others. As to the 85th percentile, that issue has been addressed by the state legislature. It's going to take some time, but over the next 2 years, I would expect us to have much more flexibility in that. So work with your staff to make sure that that this change really does happen. The bill was AB 43 and was finally passed and signed last fall. This project is really very important in the sense that we need to reduce driving by about 6% per year in order to reach climate goals. And if you cannot reduce driving because people are afraid to walk or bicycle, we're in a difficult spot. And the one other issue that I have raised and would like to have you carry back to your jurisdictions is that the quality of reports are really the key to the network. Police officers are busy. They like to make a report quickly, especially if it's a minor accident, but could have been much worse. So I think auditing reports periodically, maybe every 10th report to be audited so that we're sure that we're getting good data is going to be very important. So thank you for your interest in this, and there's a lot yet to be done.
All right, thank you, Steve. Next I have in line is Mayor Sam Salmon. Excuse me, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
I have to keep up with Steve Biddlebaum. That's a high order. 2 things. In the road design, you showed an example of a road diet. It was very familiar. It looked like Brooks Road in Windsor with the 4 lanes and its wide streets. The idea to use roundabouts is a really good one because it actually does slow traffic more than traffic lights in my estimation. And if we could just get them to be smaller, it would be good. And secondly, looking long range, can we think about talking to the legislature about European enforcement, where you take a picture of a speeding car by radar, and then in the mail you get your ticket? I had a friend come back from Europe, and he got a ticket in the mail. If he ever wanted to go back to that country, he was going to probably have to pay it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item.
All right, thank you so much, Drew. I'll go ahead and bring it back for comments, and I'll start with Director Landman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'll try and keep this short. I'm not going to spend a lot of time pointing out the numerous things in this report that I really like, and I think are very beneficial. Look forward to seeing us work on. I'll just point out a few concerns that popped up, if I might, for feedback to staff. And one concern that popped up was a suggestion, I believe it was in 4.3, of the implementation of a dedicated funding stream for equity priority communities. 3 areas generally in the unincorporated county, although they touch on some of our municipalities a little bit. When this comes back, to be able to actually see if this is something that we wish to support or recommend to our colleagues, or just how this would work, I'd really like to see a more in-depth look at where this portion of the funding might come from. Most importantly, how it would impact, or more importantly, lessen the funding that the rest of our communities, both municipalities and also other portions of the county, depend on, most of which these areas aren't exactly wealthy or overserved either. And I say this only because one of the key facets of SCTA has been we've spent years developing a framework where it's agreed upon without not terribly much complaining on how we share resources. And we've been incredibly successful with that. And it's working rather well, I've come to feel, in these last years. And with that, I'm naturally curious when there's suggestions to any changes to that. So I really want some in-depth data on what is actually being suggested before I just agree to it without knowing that. That would be important. I'll give the example of our 2 communities, Mr. Chair. Over the years, I've watched Santa Rosa's funding, and it's obviously a lot bigger than Cotati's. But I'm not complaining that because I recognize Santa Rosa has a lot more roads, a lot more pedestrians, just a lot more needs than we do. And with that, I think it seems reasonable. If in fact a funding proposal came forward that said, because of its success, Santa Rosa is oversubscribed and we're going to slow them down and give more to Cotati, I'm not sure if I feel that would really be something equitable and could support it, even though obviously it would be beneficial. So I'd like us to look a little more deeply into that. Moving on, I'll point out one of the calls for improvements is for increasing transit. It's not a key portion, but a significant portion of part of this plan in section 2. And I had a little concern about that, not the concept, which I agree with strongly. I think one of the key things what we lack is a really world-class transit system that reaches into all facets of the county and the cities. But as we know, we've discussed this previously over the years, that there's nowhere near the funding we can ever find to achieve this. I believe in our Measure DD discussions, it was pointed out that our entire funding stream that we use for our roads, our highways, our city streets, our bike paths, our transit, and our rail wouldn't really be enough to deliver a quality transit system that would equitably serve the county. So if we're going to include this as an action item, I'd like it to at least indicate what its true scope is supposed to be, or where those dollars might come from, sources, general viability, because otherwise it's much like talking about AB 43. I agree, I'd love to see us reduce speeds. We tried to do that some years ago and ran up against the problems my colleagues from the Board of Supervisors talked about. And until that changes, there's really nothing to be done there. So it's kind of almost an empty promise. So I would like to see that expanded and talked about just a little bit deeper. And lastly, on the concept of a report card, I get the idea behind a report card. It's a device to apply general pressure, positive and maybe a little negative if necessary, reinforcement for things. I'm not sure if I'm sold on the idea of that here for our cities, at least in this particular process, especially if we are talking about changing funding allocations at all. I'm not sure if I want to support or encourage that in this particular situation. We've yet to use that as a device. That would be like we're trying to twist our own arms. And I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that myself. And lastly, somebody mentioned truck routes. I just had to mention, this is something we bumped into years ago. It's pretty easy to do, or at least that's what I was told by Myers Navi's attorneys that work for us. And were able to make significant changes and move trucks out of our downtown. Briefly put, you have to provide a truck route, but it doesn't have to be the most straightforward, the most desired, or the easiest to use. It just has to be a route that trucks can take. So if any of my colleagues are interested in doing this in their downtown, I think it's a great idea. And all you have to do is talk to your city attorney, because it's a local truck ordinance, and you can do that to the best of my knowledge. So thank you for the time, Mr. Chair and staff. I look forward to hearing on these things when this comes back.
All right, thank you, Director. We'll go to Director Fisher.
Thank you. I agree that we can put in truck routes. It's a matter of enforcing it. And it's a matter of letting those people in those trucks know that they're on the wrong roadway and that they have to go somewhere else. Because trucks are not allowed in our downtown, and yet that's where they go because it's the most direct route. So it's more complicated. And I would agree with you, Mr. Landman, that the report card being on a county scale, I'm just going to point to you and say it's Windsor's problem, or it's Cloverdale's problem, or you didn't do enough. We did. So I think it's because we're looking at, what we're doing in jurisdictions versus having a report card for the county. I'm not sure that that's going to be as effective as, unless we start identifying what the cities are doing. And then the last thing I just want to say to Mayor Salmon, you actually don't have to go to Europe to get a ticket for speeding or for running a red light. You can just go to LA. And we might want to include that, maybe that as one of the policies or one of the options for people is putting in those systems. I don't know much about them, except for I've been on the receiving end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. We'll go to Director Reynosa.
Yeah, thank you very much. A lot of people asked the questions that I was asking, but I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. Director Bagby from Cloverdale, thank you for bringing up our older adults. And I just wanted to give one example as you start looking into what we can do. But we have a free transit system here in Windsor, and I run into some older adults that are shopping at a grocery store, and they love the free bus, but they say one route takes 15 minutes to get to the grocery store, and then the loop back home takes 45 minutes. So they can't buy frozen items for that, especially during the summer, for the 45-minute drive back. So that's something to think about as we go dive into this a little bit more. Another thing, I just wanted to applaud you for looking at root causes for the driving, the impaired driving, distracted driving, drunk driving. What are the root causes? I love that part. But also when you're doing your goals, it's really going to be important for the data to be real data. And because right now it sounds like it's the public perception creating those goals. And so the sooner we can move forward to really connecting to what's causing these crashes, I think the better results we're going to have at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to Director Gurney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. St. Sebastopol would love to have 2 free buses running at the same time, just like Windsor is mentioning, and that frozen food doesn't melt. We'd also like truck routes, but when we have to move our trucks off of our main street, which is Highway 116, puts them in our residential neighborhood. So we have to realize that small cities always have this real estate problem, and we always have a funding problem. So I want to give on the other hand, to Director Landman's remarks about Santa Rosa being big, and he understands how they get big money. Well, for Sebastopol, our issues like the 2 crosswalks that were part of the SHOP program that were denied are huge projects, but to the rest of y'all, they might look really tiny, but they add a tremendous amount in terms of pedestrian and bicycle safety in our most congested areas. Again, we're looking at, in those cases, 2 crosswalks on Highway 116 southbound. That's our South Main Street. Also, I want to indicate to you that Phoebe Golden, our Civic Spark Fellow, has been doing her community engagement work. The #1 priority she's getting in the climate action framework is a car-free world that is safe for pedestrians and bicyclists. That's what our community wants more than anything, which speaks again to this complete street issue and the priority that we need to place. And it's all of a big network here. Everything touches everything, and almost every decision seems to touch the climate. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Director. That's the last hand that I see. As I mentioned, this was an informational item, so go ahead and move the item. Thank you, Laurel. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, everybody, Quinn, for participating. This item will come back to the board here in the future, and so I know that there will be more discussion at that point. With that, Madam Executive Director, could we go on to item 4.6, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Rogers, I'm going to hand this item over to David Ripperda, who is going to fill the board in on a proposal we would like to submit to the state for some grant funding for transit. So I'll hand it off to David.
And good afternoon, Mr. Chair and directors. This item is about the Transit Interstate Rail Capital Program. And as the Executive Director mentioned, we have a funding proposal in front of you. Just kidding. So to give you background on this program, the Transit Interstate Rail Capital Program, or TIRCIP, funds transformative capital projects that will help modernize California transit systems. This is a funding program that's funded not only through Senate Bill 1, but also the Cap and Trade program. And the goals of the program are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and expand and integrate transit and rail service and improve safety. And funding from this program was previously awarded to SMART for their extensions to Larkspur and Windsor. For this upcoming funding program, about $500 million is available over the next 5 years. As part of this proposal, we work closely with SMART, Santa Rosa City Bus, Petaluma Transit, and Sonoma County Transit to come up with a regional approach rather than having multiple applications going after this funding source. And we came up with a proposal using the applications that were developed by the transit operators as part of the 2021 funding program last year. And this is really a 4-phase proposal that we have for you. One would be transit integration, looking at continuing the efforts that have already occurred with the transit operators. Second would be looking at the integration of the transit mall in downtown Santa Rosa. The largest funding proponent of this project would be bus electrification, and also looking at info rail station in Petaluma. So to give you some background for those of you new to the board, we have several transit operators throughout the county. These include SMART, Petaluma Transit, Santa Rosa City Bus, Golden Gate Transit, and Sonoma County Transit. We also have limited transit service provided along the Highway 101 corridor and Highway 1 corridor by the Mendocino Transit Authority. So this application is looking at how we can help integrate several of these operators and improve service for the public. As part of our existing transit integration work, we are doing a number of planning studies to help integrate the services. These include looking at better integrating the planning of the different bus services, the fare programs, customer service, and public information marketing. As part of this proposal in front of you, we are looking at several additional items to occur over the next 3 fiscal years. And this is really looking at helping create a seamless and consistent transit service for all bus riders throughout the county, and rebranding the 3 transit services of Petaluma Transit, Sonoma County Transit, and Santa Rosa City Bus into one common theme. And this could be new graphics, new mapping, and transit hub and bus shelter themes that could be common to all 3 operators. As part of this proposal, we are also looking at a study that Santa Rosa City Bus has requested to evaluate the downtown transit mall in Santa Rosa and how that can work better to integrate with the downtown smart station, and identifying what kind of infrastructure improvements and technology improvements need to occur to help create better service for the public in downtown Santa Rosa. On the bus electrification side, we are looking at proposing a request to the state for 30 zero-emission buses. And this will include 14 buses for Sonoma County Transit, 6 buses for Santa Rosa City Bus, and 10 for Petaluma Transit. And so this would remove a large number of diesel and compressed natural gas buses off the road with clean electric buses in the future. This was also include electric charging infrastructure for all 3 operators, and also remote charging stations throughout the county for Sonoma County Transit, so that not only our urban areas, but our rural areas are benefiting from these new improved services.
This would also include passenger amenities in Petaluma to increase ridership. The last component that we are putting in front of you is an info rail station for SMART in Petaluma at Corona Road and McDowell Boulevard. This is a rail station that's adjacent to an affordable housing development that's been proposed and will include the platform and parking that we need for the station. This is a project that was previously submitted to the state for funding, however, it was not successful. But we feel that this is a very strong contender going forward. With these components, we have a total request of about 24.8 million that we'd be submitting to the state. And we have gotten some feedback from them that they would like some additional scope to include some bus transit fare collection systems for Mendocino County Transit Authority to help integrate with the statewide system. But however, the state has given us feedback they are very interested in a proposal, and that's why we are bringing this in front of you. So at this time, staff is requesting that you adopt a resolution authorizing SCTA staff to submit the grant application to the state on March 3rd and to enter into any agreements necessary with the state to move forward the grant. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, board, do we have any questions? Director Gurney.
Thank you. This is a question I'm going to ask staff. It's not really to you, David, for an offline answer. How does the festival get that second bus I was just talking about? Since we're talking about transportation and transit and money right now. So help me out offline. I would really like to know how to make that happen. Thank you also for featuring the Route 24 shuttle in so many photos. I noticed and I appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Director Gurney. We'll have somebody follow up with you offline as well. Go ahead, Director Reynosa.
So just looking over the packet, and this is, again, I probably need to get a little bit educated and more familiar with everything, but it says there is a fiscal impact. What is that fiscal impact? Who is it affecting? What is it affecting? So the fiscal impact would be if we received the funding. So currently, as I mentioned earlier, we had received funding applications from all three operators in SMART to receive funding through SCTA for our 2021 funding program. And currently, staff is evaluating those applications and we'll be bringing them back to the board for action later in the summer. If, however, we receive these grant funding from the state, that would allow us to fund these projects through state funding instead, and we'd be able to fund other projects through the state and federal funds that are considered as part of the 2021 funding program. So okay, we're really trying. Okay, thank you. And so there's 14.1 million for the SMART, this infill station, and then you had mentioned earlier that, you know, they had applied to come all the way to Windsor. They're not in Windsor yet. Is there, you know, I'd like to see it completed. So I don't know why we're focused on another project rather than keep it moving along to Cloverdale eventually. So I'm just kind of wondering what's happening there with the other funds they were supposed to get or didn't get. Sure, through the chair, I can respond. So currently, SMART, as I mentioned earlier, received funds from this funding source to do the extensions to Larkspur and up to Windsor. They currently cannot receive additional funds from this funding source for the extension to Windsor and the extension to Cloverdale. They are not currently eligible for this funding source as the project is not included in the Metropolitan Transportation Commission's Regional Transportation Plan. So we are supportive of those extensions. However, for this funding source, currently only the Petaluma North Station is eligible for funding.
You good, Director Reynosa? Okay, good. All right, we'll go to public comment then on this item.
Confirming, I don't see any members of the public who wish to speak on this item.
I do not either, so I'll go ahead and bring it back. Director Bagby.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to recommend the resolution and read it out by title only.
Okay.
Through the chair, I'd be happy to second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I see two other hands here. Let's go to Director Corsi, who I think might have been making a motion. Director Fisher.
Well, I would make that motion, but I just want to say, I wish everyone keeps their fingers and toes crossed on this. If we can get that second station in Petaluma, it would mean the world to us to meet our goals. And we've been trying and trying and trying, as you know, to get it funded. And also to be able to electrify our entire fleet. How amazing would that be? I mean, boy, so super excited. Fingers crossed.
All right, thank you, Director. Any other comments from directors? All right, Drew, let's call the vote.
Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Yes.
Director Giudice, Director Gurney,
Aye.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Landman,
Yes.
Director Lowe,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins,
Yes.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye. All right, and that motion passes. Thank you so much. We'll move on to item 4.7.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a quick update on the Future of Transit Ad Hoc Committee. When the committee last met in January, the main topic of discussion was the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program grant that you just heard a full staff report on, and an update from the operators on the paratransit coordination work that they are developing right now. I think that was the bulk of the meeting, unless any of the ad hoc members want to add to that report.
Are there any other comments from ad hoc members? All right, seeing none, I'll just say with a couple of new folks on SCTA's board and on RCPA's board, if you are interested in serving on that ad hoc, please let me know. We have a couple of openings and we will be filling them. And so folks who are interested, just let me know offline and we'll make those appointments before our next ad hoc meeting. I'll go to the public really fast to see if there's any comment on that update.
Confirming, I don't see any members of the public with their hands up on this item.
Perfect. Let's keep moving then to item 4.7. Oh, excuse me, 4.8.
All right, I will hand this off to Tanya Nareth to talk about 2022's work plan for the climate mobilization strategy.
Thank you, Suzanne, and good afternoon, Chair Rogers and directors. BC CAPS and I are here today to provide an update on the status of the Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy and our proposed policy priorities for 2022. So BC, if you could share the slides, that'd be great. And if you can go to the next slide, please. So I will begin with a brief overview of the status of the priority objectives that RCPA has been working on since the mobilization strategy was adopted by the board in March of 2021. Then I'll turn it over to BC to present our proposed policy priorities for your feedback and direction. Specifically, we would like to know if you support these proposed policies and if there are additional policies you would like to see prioritized for action in 2022. Next slide, please. So when the Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy was adopted by the board, you directed us to focus on a subset of the 13 strategies and related objectives for the next 12 to 18 months. This table shows an overview of the status of these priority objectives, and we've included a more detailed table in your board meeting packet, and I'll highlight a few key items here for you now. In the area of decarbonization, or reducing the use of fossil fuels to power our buildings, RCPA is focused on promoting the Bay Rent energy efficiency programs, promoting Sonoma Clean Powers programs, including the launch of its new Advanced Energy Center. And lastly, we've been researching policy options and resources to accelerate electrification of new and existing buildings. And this research led to the set of priorities that we're presenting to you today. In the area of transportation, a great deal of work has been done by the Future Transit Ad Hoc and our colleagues at SCTA on the Transit Integration Project. And RCPA has helped revise the greenhouse gas reduction strategies that you saw in the updated Comprehensive Transportation Plan. We also completed the California Energy Commission grant-funded work on EV adoption, which included maintaining the EV 101 knowledge base and supporting our local jurisdictions on EV charging station permit streamlining. And then finally, we developed the resolution that you adopted recently, which recommended the prohibition of new gas stations, and we have started working with our local jurisdictions on their gas station bans. In the area of sequestration, our focus this past year was on identifying funding to support carbon farm plans and other sequestration practices.
We were successful in working with partner agencies on a compost project application to the County of Sonoma's Climate Resilience Fund, and we look forward to beginning work on the project with our partners this year. In the area of resilience and adaptation, our main focus this last year was managing the project to bring the Urban Land Institute Resilience Advisory Services Panel to Sonoma County. And as Ross mentioned in the annual report, we released the final report in the fall of 2021. And then lastly, in the area of equity and community engagement, we worked with the board to revise the Climate Action Advisory Committee charter to place a greater emphasis on equity and to highlight the skills and experiences that we felt were needed for the implementation of the mobilization strategy. We also completed a draft community engagement and outreach plan for the funding for climate ad hoc, which you'll hear more about later. And then we completed staff equity training and started development of an equity framework for the SCTA and RCPA. So that concludes my update on our status, and I'll hand it off now to BC to present the proposed policy priorities. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Tanya. Good afternoon, Chair Rogers and directors. In the next few slides, I would like to present our recommendations for several new proposed priorities for our staff work over the course of this upcoming year. And I wanted to highlight that these items were developed in close conjunction with the SCTA Planning Advisory Committee, both their meetings in October and December 2021, and then were also reviewed with some minor modifications by the RCPA Climate Action Advisory Committee at their meeting in January of this year. So we have 6 proposed items I wanted to present very quickly. In the item in the arena of building energy, this project would focus on reducing energy efficiency within new construction. And so what we are proposing is to compile a portfolio of energy code related ordinances that can be adopted by local jurisdictions to reduce GHG emissions in new construction. So this is really in the arena of the REACH codes. Several cities already have REACH codes that allow them to go above and beyond California state building standards. And we would be working with the jurisdictions to look at which of those need to be updated with the new code cycle that would go into effect in January 1st of the upcoming year, and which jurisdictions would be interested in adopting a new REACH code in that arena. Our main resources that we'll be working with and have already started to work with is really working with the Bay Area Regional Energy Network Codes and Standards Program, as well as the state's, the CPUC statewide REACH codes program. So that first item is really around new construction REACH codes, electric REACH codes for new construction of buildings. Second item is still within the realm of building energy. We would be looking at strategies to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions having to do with existing buildings. And we are look to create basically an electrification strategy, again, that could be used as a resource for local jurisdictions to adopt as they wanted to look at areas for them to reduce their, for advancements that they could make within their local jurisdictions on existing buildings. Really key is we're looking and have been very much inspired by a recent strategy document that's been produced by the city of Berkeley. Their existing buildings electrification strategy really has all of the core components that we would like to see replicated here in Sonoma County. And one of the areas of that document that I'm most impressed with is it really has a strong theme that runs all throughout it around the equitability of these improvements and looking at communities of concern and underserved communities and thinking through the implications that proposed changes may have both for the general populace, but especially for the equitable, for kind of underserved communities and communities of concern. So the second item here is, again, having to do with building energy on existing buildings. Our third item, moving into the realm of transportation, is we would be looking to work closely with our in-house staff here with the Transportation Authority, with SCTA, on looking at the strategies that are have been identified in the comprehensive transportation plan that was adopted last year, that really has to do focused on the greenhouse gas emissions. So there is substantial overlap between the CTP document and our Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy. And so we've already been looking at what's the overlap between those two plans and how can we bring together both of our planning and our implementation work to really kind of try to look at the synergies between those two plans as we move into implementation. There's been over 50 strategies that have been identified. They're listed. They're in 7 different categories. They're listed there on the slide, and it ranges everything from bicycle and pedestrian improvements all the way to technology improvements. So we'd be looking to kind of invigorate that working, strengthen that working relationship kind of between our two sides of the organization here. So that's our third one. Moving on to our fourth proposal, still within the realm of transportation. This would be looking at providing support around the establishment and adoption of electric vehicle reach codes. So these would be looking at developing reach codes that would strengthen, that would encourage the installation of additional electric vehicle chargers throughout the county. A lot of this work would be based upon the work that had been previously done in the SHIFT plan. And we would be coordinating this work with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, the EV Coordinating Council at the Bay Area region, and our local Sonoma County local government electric vehicle partnership, of which I believe it's just this week is actually meeting for the first time in a while to bring together all of the bring together many of the fleet managers throughout the county to talk about their existing electric vehicle work and how that work could be supported by RCPA staff. There's also wanted to highlight that I think there's an incredible amount of potential for working on this for looking at multifamily housing and at workplace charging as two key opportunity areas that we would like to dig into. So that's our fourth item having to do with transportation. Fifth item here, carbon sequestration within the realm of carbon sequestration and ecosystem services. We have been contacted by a number of jurisdictions and some community groups that are looking at urban forestry issues and looking at the realm for how there could be a coordinated effort across jurisdictions around the planning and implementation of urban forest conservation plans and tree protection ordinances. So this would, in general, a tree protection ordinance is really about setting up restrictions on the guidelines for when trees can be cut down. And then a conservation plan is really around the planning effort on how to install more trees and how to manage that kind of urban forest over the long term. Number of co-benefits in this, in addition to just planting more trees for the aesthetic beauty, but really a lot of looking at the carbon sequestration potential, the urban heat island issues, soil erosion issues. And there's a number of partners we'd be looking to work with at the county scale with the Forest Conservation Working Group, and then at the more local level, looking at some of the California Urban Forest Council, California Relief, and Relief Petaluma as some examples of organizations that have that are kind of top of our list and that we've started to contact. So that's our fifth item. And moving on to our final proposal within the realm of equity and community engagement. A number of local jurisdictions are either in the process or are planning for updates to their general plans. This is a process that's done approximately every 10 years. Jurisdictions can adopt an entirely new general plan or work on kind of chapter by chapter. And so we would be looking to work with the jurisdictions as they update those plans and provide some input. Again, this is something that's really led by the local jurisdictions. Our role here is really in resource finding, kind of unearthing resources, sharing those, and providing best practices. So we would be looking at ways that climate issues and greenhouse gas reduction could really be integrated into the housing elements, the safety elements, land use, circulation, open space, and conservation elements that are being worked on by local jurisdictions. So my final slide here, this shows the full list of all 6. So again, 2 within building carbonization or within building energy, 2 within transportation, 1 within carbon sequestration, and 1 within equity and community engagement. So with that, I wanted to say thank you. That concludes our presentation, and both Tanya and I are here for any questions and discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, BC and Tanya. Let's start with Director Reynosa.
Oh, good, because I have to leave soon. I didn't know how long these meetings lasted. I have an appointment at 5. But I did want to, I wanted to find out if this group or the RCPA, are we doing anything? Are you doing anything about the PUC changing the rules for the rooftop solar? I brought it up in the town of Windsor, and we're actually going to, I believe, write a letter to oppose the changes that they're wanting to implement. And so I'm wondering if that discussion has been brought up here, because you talked about the, energy efficient appliances.
Through the chair, I'll give a brief answer, but then I'll defer to Tanya and Suzanne. That is something we're very aware of and are watching very closely, tracking very closely. As far as official action, I do not believe that it has been discussed by this board.
No, we have not brought it to this board for discussion, but we have definitely been tracking it.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
And I will note, Director, I've sent a letter with my other mayor's hat on, and would be happy to, if the motion would like for us to send one from RCPA as well.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to do that. Thank you.
Great. We'll come back here at the end or have discussion about including it. We'll go to Director Kelly, followed by Director Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask a little bit about the data sourcing on some of the GHG emission calculations for the jurisdictions. I know that came up recently when Healdsburg was updating our REACH code, that there didn't seem to be enough information available to council members who wanted to get a better understanding of what the REACH code implementation and the volume of emission reductions would look like. So just curious a little bit on the source of that data. And is that coming from the jurisdictions, or is that work RCPA is doing in-house or somewhere else?
So in parallel to all the work that we're doing on the mobilization strategy, we are also currently conducting a community-wide, county-wide greenhouse gas inventory. So that will be completed. RCPA does that approximately every 2 years. We're currently doing that, collecting data for that now, and we hope to have those results available sometime in June or July of this year for presentation to the board. The data that comes from that comes directly from PG&E, comes from Sonoma Clean Power, and I've been working with the Healdsburg utility, the utility director, to both authorize the release of PG&E data for us for that analysis, as well as getting the internal data for the municipal utility district. So that is all going into our calculations, and we'll be able to present that back to you within the next couple of months. We certainly have all the values from previous inventories that we can share. That is all a snapshot of current emissions. That does not necessarily answer any sort of question about what would be the reduction from these specific proposals. Just wanted to clarify that the inventory is really a 2-year snapshot. So great. Hopefully that answers.
And Director Kelly, if I could just jump in here as well, if there were specific questions that you were that you had about the data, we'd be happy to work with staff to make sure that we're presenting the data that we have in a way that makes sense. So if there's any way that we could help in working with Terry and his team on the data that you're not finding, we'd be happy to help with that.
All right, let's go to Director Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Rogers. Not sure how to frame my question or my comment, but in looking at this work plan for the year, I'm wondering how it's going to benefit Petaluma, and I don't think it will in any way, given the work that we've already done and are doing. Particularly now with our Climate Commission has some ad hocs that we're working on transportation, and we're working on some other overarching topics. And so I guess I'm wondering who it really serves, the work that you're going to be doing or proposing to do, like with general plan updates. You know, we're pretty far down that road, and I know Santa Rosa is as well. So it'd be nice to get into some more meat about, you know, how is this really helping us reach our 2030 goal? And is this what our jurisdictions need? You know, Cloverdale needs a lot more than we do. And I'm not sure this is what Cloverdale needs. That's all. It's not really a question. It's just shaking my head.
We can come back for discussion in a few. I'll see if there are any other questions from board members before I go to the public. All right, seeing none. I see 3 hands.
All right, we'll start with Tyra Benoit. Hi, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Tyra Benoit. I'm one of Healdsburg's representatives on the Climate Action Advisory Committee. And this is just a little bit of a follow-up to Director Kelly's question about developing this greenhouse gas inventory, because I've been poring over the 2018 update and comparing it to earlier data. So using the city of Healdsburg as an example, if someone could just clarify, does that mean that both PG&E, since we use gas from PG&E and from our electric utilities department, that the data is submitted by those 2 organizations to figure out the GHG emissions? That's my question. Thank you. And thank you for all you do.
All right, thank you, Tyra. We'll take a note down and I'll have BC respond after our public comment. Let's go on to our next one.
The next one in line is Beverly Shore. Beverly, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm Beverly Shore, and I'm a Petaluma appointee to RCPA. And I wanted to sort of address some of the issues that Director Fisher mentioned, and that is that ordinances are easy to endorse, but they are very difficult to implement. And is there some way that we can do more to help all the others in the county to address and implement some of these climate actions? For example, not every jurisdiction has the staff to review, much less to implement these plans. Can we find funding sources to help with expertise? Can we find funding sources for maintenance, particularly around trees and carbonization, or money to buy trees to plant, especially in some of our more vulnerable neighborhoods? So if we can use our expertise to gather funding sources so that other jurisdictions can more easily implement them, I think that we would be going a lot farther in our quest for climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Next I have in line is Steve Bertelbaugh. Steve, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you, Steve Bertelbaugh with the Transportation Land Use Coalition. In answer to Director Fisher's question, I think a lot of the impact of a countywide organization working on all these issues is that it refines the information, and I hope it's getting to staff so that their workload is much less and that they can move more quickly. The adoption of a carbon neutral goal of 2030 is pretty aggressive. And it's going to involve a lot of people shifting from driving to using their bicycles for short trips and being able to walk, and creating walkable infrastructure in some places is very important. So I think having a countywide picture on this is of great value to everybody. And I really appreciate what the staff is doing and what the board is doing. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Steve. Next I have in line is Rick Lutman. Rick, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I was pleased to hear a few minutes ago the suggestion that your board take a position in opposition to the CPUC plans regarding rooftop solar. I think it's outrageous that in the middle of the game, they're going to change the rules. I'm a homeowner who has 7 kilowatts of solar power on my rooftop. I'm in about a third of the way through a 20-year prepaid lease, and the entire economics of the investment I made will change if these rules that are proposed are adopted. I strongly suspect that there would even be lawsuits if they go ahead with this. So I strongly urge you to take the position that was suggested and file your opposition to this proposal.
All right, thank you, Rick. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item.
Okay, thank you so much. I will go ahead and pull it back to the board then. Let's go ahead and see if we can put a motion on the table first to guide any discussion, and then we'll come back to the actual discussion of the motion.
This is in regards to the rooftop solar?
This is in regards to the entire item, accepting the mobilization strategy priority policies. And then if you wanted to include the aspect around the letter regarding NEM 3.0, I'm happy to entertain that.
So then I'll make the motion to do exactly what you just said. Is that fine? Does that work?
That's perfect. Yep,
Okay.
Just looking for a second.
Second, Ariel Kelly.
Okay, so we have a motion from Director Reynosa and a second from Director Kelly. Is there any discussion on the motion? And I'll start with the Vice Chair.
Thank you. I am totally supportive of the motion, but I just wanted to flag something, which is that I was so excited by the conversation around Vision Zero. And I got the sense that the whole board probably could have discussed that for another 3 hours and how it relates to our jurisdiction. And so just sort of in the hopes of, moving forward that agenda, really looking at how that aligns with some of the priorities that were already called out in exactly this document that we're moving forward. And so, I mean, maybe it's a friendly amendment to say, hey, can we sort of lump Vision Zero into, this sort of document, particularly under, I had it out, I think it was the sort of transportation priorities, existing priorities, strategy 3, drive less Sonoma County. Which I felt like that was really part and parcel of it, just so that we can kind of, I don't know, bring these awesome efforts and all of the grassroots momentum of that together. So I guess I would ask for a friendly amendment to just sort of incorporate the Vision Zero vision into that item initiative A2 strategy 3, drive less Sonoma County.
So I'll check with the motion and see if you accept the friendly amendment.
I accept the friendly amendment.
And the second?
Second, yes.
Okay, we'll include that. Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, Drew, please call the vote.
I'm sure you just called on me, Drew, but you were muted.
I mean, we've only been doing this for how long? Excuse me. Director Bagby.
Hi.
Director Corsi.
Yes.
Director Fisher.
Yes.
Director Giudice. Director Gurney.
Aye.
Director Kelly.
Aye.
Director Landman.
I just want to confirm my internet was cutting in and out. We added one aspect from our plan, not the entire plan. Was that correct? Not the entire Vision Zero? Since we haven't completed it yet, I just wanted to confirm.
Yes, I'm seeing shaking heads, so I'm just confirming with folks that that is what their expectation was. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. It's important to know what you're voting for. And with that, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director Lowe,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins,
Aye.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye. All right, looks like that does pass. Director Bagby, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just, are we ready to make a comment about the possible letter to CPUC, Mr. Chair?
That was included in the motion.
Okay. May I make a comment?
Yeah, let's also see, I've got BC with his hand up. Let's make sure that he's finished with this part of the item first, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I know we're running short on time, but I wanted to clarify, there was a question from public comments about the data sources from Healdsburg.
Oh yeah, thank you so much, BC.
I want to come back to that. We are pulling data directly from PG&E, who holds a handful of accounts still within Healdsburg, as well as the natural gas service from Healdsburg. And we're pulling all of the accounts directly from Healdsburg Utility and meshing those together to get hopefully a complete picture of what of energy use throughout the city. There are a small fraction of those accounts that are actually excluded from the data request because of the size of the customer and their data privacy rules, but it is attempting to get a full and complete picture of everything within the city limits. So, thank you.
Excellent, thank you so much. Go ahead, Director Bagby.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Maybe I misunderstood. I thought we were going to just discuss the possible letter to the CPUC separately after the motion. But if we're already done with that, I'll lower my hand.
Yeah, Director Reynosa just rolled them into the same motion.
Gotcha.
To have us send a letter on it.
Great. I'm sorry. Apologies. Thank you.
Nope, it's all good. And I know some folks have to jump off here at 5 for their own council meetings and other meetings. We'll try to get through the remaining items fairly quickly. We've got item 4.9, that's the update on the funding for climate ad hoc, and just a report out from its last meeting. So I'll go to the vice chair to see if she wants to make a quick update.
Yeah, and I actually think that staff was going to summarize just briefly a couple of the things that we talked about. So Suzanne or Tanya, take it away.
Sure, I can jump in and Suzanne can add. Thank you, Chair Rogers and directors. So at the February 3rd Funding for Climate Ad Hoc meeting, there were 3 main items that were discussed by the committee. Staff shared information on a new bill on climate resilience districts, SB 852, that we're very interested in supporting and pursuing. The committee also reviewed a draft outreach and engagement plan for the Funding for Climate Ad Hoc work, and then finally looked at a draft outline of presentation slides that staff is putting together for directors to use in sharing information about the mobilization strategy and our climate priorities. So just a few comments about the SB 852 bill. This has been introduced by Senator Dodd, and it's sponsored by the Local Government Commission. And this bill would allow cities, counties, or special districts to establish climate resilience financing districts to undertake and fund projects and programs that would address climate change, including wildfires, sea level rise, and other impacts of climate. The piece about this that we're very interested in is that the districts would be able to raise revenue through tax increment funding, voter approved supplemental property taxes, property benefit assessments, or fees. And the districts would have the authority to plan and implement projects and programs to address climate change. So the committee talked about this in that RCPA could technically form a district on its own. And this would resolve the issue that we have where we don't have any authority currently to raise revenue. But the committee identified an opportunity with the bill and asked staff to follow up with the author of the bill to look at the feasibility of actually adding language into the bill that would give RCPA this taxing authority as our existing entity without having to create a new district. And that would, we're already in operation, we're already doing a lot of the work that this bill would support, and this would just give us the funding opportunity or the funding authority. And so we are following up on that recommendation and should be able to bring more information back to the board in the future. Suzanne, would you want to add anything about SB 852? No, just that we're working with the author's office and talking with the sponsor, and it looks like an interesting and exciting opportunity.
So I'd be happy to share more about the draft engagement and outreach plan, but I know that we're kind of running short on time. So Vice Chair Hopkins, if there's anything you'd want to call out from that specifically, would turn it back to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we are hoping to leverage every single one of you on this board to help us with the outreach and engagement plan. So hopefully we can maybe follow up, by email with some specific opportunities. And obviously all within the confines of the Brown Act in terms of how we conduct this. We want to make sure that we're following the rules, but we really want to leverage your relationship with your community so that there's a sort of community specific, you'll have kind of a presentation, right, that we can provide you, so that we have sort of almost a roadshow that we can go and take to different communities. So we really want to use your existing relationships and your ability to really garner site specific feedback from every single community to inform us. And I also have to say that I'm looking forward to our next ad hoc meeting to also talk about how Vision Zero kind of folds into that, because I feel like there was a lot of good visioning around that. What could communities look like, are some of the things that we want to fund as well. But I definitely want to engage with all of you. And we're kind of imagining like an Earth Day kickoff in terms of kind of the timing of when we really want to start this community outreach, because that seemed like a good one to try to set a goal for us. So anything else that I missed, Tanya or Suzanne or Chair Rogers, you were also in that meeting.
I think the only other thing that I would add is just like the future of transit ad hoc, we are looking for new members. So if you're interested in serving on this ad hoc, please reach out to the vice chair. I'll go to the public really fast to see if we have any public comment on the item.
Confirming no hands from public comment on this item.
Okay. Madam Executive Director, do you want to take us through the item 5 on the agenda, the reports and announcements?
Sure. So item 5.1 was the executive committee, and the executive committee did meet today and discussed Vision Zero and some work, the preliminary work that we are doing on an equity statement for the board to consider. We'll be bringing that back to the board in March or April. We also talked about how the SCTA sets policy and sort of the ground up version versus the big picture version. And it was more of a sort of philosophical discussion, I think, about the manner in which SCTA RCPA operates, and then also discussed my evaluation and compensation, which will be another item for a future agenda. Item 5.2, I don't know if there's anybody on the board who sits on a regional agency that would want to report out.
I'm seeing no hands.
All right. The advisory committee agendas for all of our advisory committees are attached to the agenda packet. And then Chair Rogers, would it be all right if we ran through the staff reports, activities reports with each of the staff, or what's your pleasure?
Yeah, go ahead. And I know if some folks do have to leave, we have no more action items. And so I do want to provide space for staff to be able to do their report. And I think we have plenty of folks for a quorum at the moment.
Okay, great. Well, I will hand the first one over then. Drew, could you elevate Ross for the marketing and communications report?
Elevated.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just to summarize the my first marketing and communications report. A lot of the items are the same things highlighted in the annual report, and that is, in fact, the first item, the 2021 SCTA RCPA annual report, which we will be printing and distributing now that it's been approved. One of the other large things was the Vision Zero workshop, which was well summarized today as well. We've been doing some work on the website and related activities and different ways to get the word out regarding Vision Zero. One thing that was not mentioned, we are in the process of undergoing kind of a back-end rebuild on the SCTA and RCPA website. mainly to address stability, out-of-date plugins, and give us some redundancy in being able to update it, not just having it fall on individual staff members. So that is in progress. This was previously approved before my time here. And that is going to continue through February with SCTA, and RCPA will be complete in March. So that will be, we'll keep you updated on that. Past events, there was 2 major Highway 37 meetings since the last board meeting occurred. Getting public feedback both on the specific stretch, Sears Point to Mare Island, as well as the PEL study. Upcoming events, several BayRen events about electrifying your home, and social media wise, just kind of getting a handle on it. Hasn't been any massive changes, but I am currently working on a overall marketing plan that will hopefully increase that. And you'll also see some attached related news articles that are linked that could be of interest. So that is my brief summary of the marketing and communications report.
Great. Thank you so much, Ross.
Thank you.
All right, Tanya, are you up for?
I can just unmute myself. Yes, here I am. So we already covered a number of things that were in the activities report, but just to highlight a couple of items. So BC had mentioned earlier that we've started work on the 2020 greenhouse gas inventory update and plan to release that this summer. So stay tuned on that. Continuing to work with the jurisdictions who are interested in pursuing gas station bans to coordinate those efforts. On the BayRen side, working with our partners in the Energy and Sustainability Division at the county, they are working on an updated version of their Home Energy Digest, which is a step-by-step guide that can be used to educate homeowners on the process to make their homes more energy efficient and to decarbonize them. So this will be, I think, a really good tool. So stay tuned for that. ESD is expecting completion in March of 2022. And then just a heads up that the BayRen commercial program has been put on hold. They lost their program implementer and have actually now, they're in the process of re-envisioning the program and expect to relaunch in May of 2022. But in the meantime, I wanted to highlight that Energy and Sustainability Division is working with a local consultant to develop an outreach plan for the Latinx business community so that when the new commercial program is ready to go, we'll have a good outreach plan into the Latinx community as well as the community at large. And then lastly, on the BayRen business plan, Chris Cohn has been hard at work for the Water Upgrade Save program in putting the business plan chapter together for Water Upgrade Save. And this is a plan that's done every certain number of years, and it includes long-term program strategies, tactics, and key performance indicators. And this latest one is for the 4-year time frame from 2024 to 2027. So that has been completed for Water Upgrade Save. And then lastly, on the Sebastopol program for Water Upgrade Save, just wanted to call out the year-end review that Chris and her team prepared that gives a really nice overview of the stats related to the Sebastopol program, highlights a number of the successes and results, and just want to really note the high customer satisfaction ratings with the program. So lots of good work in Sebastopol, and we're now working with the city of Cloverdale to start the program up there. So that concludes my report.
All right. Can we move on then to the planning activities report? I think we've got Janet.
Yes, thank you. It's a fairly long report. There are a lot of meetings listed at the end, but I'd like to highlight just a few items. Chris Barney of our staff has been working very hard with your jurisdictions to develop VMT thresholds that will help with the SB 743 requirement. That's a lot of work for him. I'd also like to draw your attention to the Safe Routes to School. A couple of paragraphs we have there. It's an ongoing program. We bring them in front of you just once a year, but they're working hard every day. And so you'll see some of the outstanding work they've done on page 206. And then later on down the line there, you'll see some alternative transportation funding programs. I'm drawing your attention to this now because you'll see it in a couple of months on the agenda. So that would be TDA Article 3, generally for bike ped projects, and TFCA for clean energy or clean air projects. So with that, I'll conclude my report. Thanks.
All right. And last cleanup, we've got James Cameron on the projects and programming.
The projects and programming activities report has a new format. As you'll see, we're focusing on the changes from month to month to make your review quick while also providing it as a comprehensive report. So in your review, if you read last month and you're just looking to see the updates, you can focus on the red sections. I hope this is helpful to all of you. I'm open to any feedback on making the report as digestible and as easy to read as possible. With that being said, I'd like to just highlight the 2021 funding program schedule that's included in the packet there. There'll be a lot of work with SCTA staff and all the jurisdictions and the TAC and the committee. But with regard to this board's action, you'll be seeing a draft funding plan or funding program coming to you in July of this year, something that after our interactions with MTC and an action by the MTC Commission would then be finalized in January of 2023. Also, you'll notice that I took away the acronyms list. Drew Nichols took some initiative to make things better around here and has incorporated an acronyms list into our entire packet. So I hope you all are enjoying pages 4 through 7. Test your friend, and that's what I got. Thank you.
I can't believe you kept it to 3 pages.
All right, I think that's it from us, Chair Rogers.
All right, we'll see. First of all, does anybody have any questions for staff on their reports? Okay, so hands go down. We'll go ahead and go to announcements by board members. Director Gurney.
Oh, thank you. Saying Cloverdale's right behind me. Very quickly, I know we all want to leave. I want to thank Tanya for her support for our Civic Spark Fellow. This is a one-of-a-kind partnership collaboration that we've done. The city with RCPA, it's going really well. Phoebe is doing a fabulous job with community engagement here in Sebastopol. I also want to share with you that the Sebastopol Walks program is relaunching for its 14th year after a 2-year hiatus due to COVID. We will be taking people out so they can experience what complete streets mean, because we don't have them everywhere, what pedestrian safety means, because, you know, it's a little chancy around here, but we're hoping to educate our citizens about how walkable this community is. And I'm hopeful that other cities will contact me about initiating a similar program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director. We'll go to Director Bagby.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say great job on your first meeting as chair. Secondly, I just want to remind staff that it's a gas station moratorium, not a ban, just in case you walk into that buzzsaw. I know that I have. And thirdly, I just wanted to announce that Cloverdale is very proud that we just approved a 75-unit affordable housing project that is LEED Platinum, water efficient, and walking distance to our middle school, our downtown, and our river park. So we're very happy to have that as an addition to our transit oriented development district. So free tours when it's open. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. With a project like that, I'm sure it was unanimous by your council, right?
Oh yeah, I'm sure you know the story.
Let's go ahead and go to public comment for our staff reports and our member announcement.
Confirming no hands raised from the public on these items.
I'm seeing none either. So with that, I'll just wish everybody a happy Valentine's Day, and thank you so much for being here, and we are adjourned.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Happy Valentine's.